to Nancy and every one of you for being here tonight. This is going to be a fantastic event this evening. You know, there are so many wonderful things happening in the country. Hard to believe considering who's president and some of the money we're spending and all the things we're doing in our government. Things are getting really exciting in American politics, and specifically about issues we care about getting rid of the debt, about limiting government, about getting back to the Constitution. There's been a movement in this country, it's in part of a youth movement, it is not exclusive to youth, to take us back to the founding principles that once made this country great. And no man, dare I say, has done more to kickstart that movement, to inspire people, and to get us back to where we need to be, the U.S. Constitution. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Texas Congressman.
I've often been impressed with, every once in a while I meet a politician, maybe 3 or 4 or 5, that actually continue to study and read and understand economics, and he's been doing this, and that really puts a lot of confidence in Tom Davis because he's really learning the issue. And that is pretty important. Most people in Washington don't have the biggest idea what it even means to have sound economic policies. They just, you know, it's sort of a gut thing. But the real tragedy is there's been three economists over the last century that have had a great deal of influence. One was Keynes, and then there was another person that influenced more people, more college students than anybody else in this country. His name was Paul Samuelson. Samuelson wrote the textbook that most anybody that graduated from any average college have been exposed to. But he is the one that in 1989 he made the very, very bold statement that it looked like communism was really working good, and it's been verified, and all those critics of communism are absolutely wrong. Of course, between 1989 and the year 1991, communism was proved to be a total failure. So, of course, now today all you have to do is pick up your weekly newspaper, and you will, daily newspaper, you'll be reading about Paul Krugman. Paul Krugman's another one. Now, it happens that most people in Washington, get influenced by individuals like that. But the individual in Washington, I bump into him now and then, that has been most influenced by that school of thought. I think his name is Ben something, Ben Bernanke. But ideas do have consequences, and that's why I'm so delighted to be a strong supporter for Tom and appreciate his friendship and appreciate all his work. And you need to keep him in the Senate, and you need to give him some power. Because someday you might decide you need to send him to Washington. There's probably a job up there that he can do too. But things are definitely changing. There is a revolution going on, and it's not narrow. It's not just in the Republican circles. It's not just in America, but worldwide. There is proof of failure of communism, and right now what we're witnessing today in these last 5 years is the failure of Keynesianism, failure of central banking, failure of fiat money. And all they have to show for all these years of all these promises is debt. And they don't know how to get out of it, so what do? They say, well, we do have a problem, they admit that. What they say is, we need more spending, more debt, and print more money. Then they wonder why we haven't gotten out of the recession, depression that's going on. I believe we're in a depression. If everybody who was suffering from a low income or loss of income and a lower standard of living and being on the dole, I'll tell you what, it's probably many more dependent on this system and on government than it was even in the Depression. So unemployment rates, even measured by the free market economists, is closer to 23%. But we have a lot of people, a huge number, 46 million people taking food stamps, and that number is growing exponentially. We have a lot of people still get disability or unemployment benefits, and then after a year or two, they get bumped off. But guess what has exploded? The disability insurance. So they go from unemployment to disability. There's more people on disability right now, but they had been on unemployment. So this is limited. That's the whole point. That is the message. This system is limited. The people know it, and they're concerned about it, but they just haven't put it all together what the solution is. But the solution is not difficult. If you have one thing that you can do that will solve all the problems, is send only individuals to Washington, D.C. that actually read and believed and followed their oath of office to follow the Constitution. That would give you a strong national defense without being the policeman of the world. It would give you a strong currency and prevent the Fed from printing money because the Fed wouldn't exist if you had a Constitution. And you indeed would have protection of civil liberties. And this is what the founders believed in, limited government. And they knew if you believed in liberty and you understood this as a God-given right, that it is personal liberty, but it's also economic liberty. And I've complained so often and tried to make this point that in the last 100 years, we've divided ourselves. And we are divided in one category that pretends they protect economic liberty, and the other side pretends they protect personal liberty. But it's all one and the same. It's our right. We have a right to your life, and you own and we're responsible for your own body and what you produce. You ought to be able to keep what you produce as well. Which of course means that not only would we not have a Federal Reserve System, we would not have an income tax under that system of government of freedom. But as our government grows, it's always at the expense of personal liberty. And as personal liberty is diminished, the standard of living goes down. And this is what we're witnessing. Over the many years, in the last 100 years, since the Fed was created, yes, there were ups and downs, but there was still a lot of productivity. But right now, the productivity isn't happening. The world still trusts us because we are a wealthy nation, a powerful nation, so they're still saying, well, we'll still take your dollars. But how long will they keep taking our dollars? Because when they take our dollars, guess what happens? Production goes overseas. We're not producing because they're taking our dollars and we're sitting around waiting and just accepting these goods and services. But that is coming to an end. That is what's been discovered in these last 5 years. In 2007, when I ran before, and 2008, it was just barely cracking the ice on some of these issues. But it's dramatically different now. People are aware that they're sick and tired of all those wars overseas too, and all the waste going on in the world. Now, I've always said a revolution, a true revolution, an ideological revolution, just as Keynesianism infiltrated both parties, a true revolution has to infiltrate the whole people. And I'm sure you heard that just about a week ago, we had a vote and we tested this, and we had bipartisan support and easily beat the Democrats on auditing the Fed. We got audited. Which means there was a coalition. We had almost 100 Democrats this was not done because all of a sudden they had all studied Austrian economics in Washington. They haven't been doing this. But a lot of you people had sent a message to your members of Congress, and they got the message. So that's the way it works. The people's attitudes will be reflected in their Congress if you let it be known. And this is why this has been so important, because the people are waking up. It's a big issue. You just can't have these deficits if you had honest money. If you had honest money, you'd have to tax the people and the people would rebel. It's so deceitful, because what they do is they finance big government, the immediate payment doesn't come due till later, and then the people who suffer, nobody can identify them because it's usually the middle class and the poor, and they suffer, they lose their jobs. The system we have today is so biased against the middle class, and it's such a rip-off, and people in Washington that promote these programs on both sides of the aisle are always doing it to take care of the people, take care of the people. At the same time, they'll have housing programs. Make sure everybody has a house. That is a good idea. Have the maximum number of people have a house. And wasn't it wonderful? People were buying their houses, they were going up in value, they could borrow even more money. But when the bubble burst, which was a predictable event, guess who got bailed out? The people who were running the derivatives market, making billions and billions of dollars. The people with Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, they got the bailouts. And guess what? The people who were supposed to be held, these people who were supposed to get their houses, they lost their jobs and they lost their houses. But this evidence now is becoming very, very clear. So we're in a stage now where the more people discover there's a problem, they're going to say, well, what do we replace it with? Well, we know what we want to replace it with. With a constitution and sound money and free markets and property rights, that's what we want to replace it with. The 20th century has shown that communism and pure socialism fails. And that was predicted by Mises, the great Austrian economist. As early as 1912, he said that it won't work because of no pricing structure. He's also said that this system would fail too, and that is what's happening. So what will it be replaced with? Will we win automatically? Absolutely not. It will not be automatic. Do we have a good chance under today's conditions? I would say we have an excellent chance. We have the momentum, we have morality on our side, we have the Constitution on our side, we have American traditions on our side, but those who will challenge us will be more fascism. That is, big business and big government going to bed together, and you'll hear it all the time. We ought to be partners with big business and big labor and all that stuff. So that is, as long as we send the contracts to the businessman and they're the insiders on the banking system, that is big business and government. And those are the individuals that we have to worry about. And now we are becoming more militaristic against our own people. I mean, this current president we have now actually believes it's no big deal that he has the right to assassinate American citizens. No charges, no trial, no whatsoever. Secret prisons. It's been going on for 10 years now that we are losing our rights of privacy. We're losing our rights in our court system. And this is a bad sign. But I tell you what, in my last 5 years, even in the last year, regardless of exactly what happens in Tampa, I'll tell you what, there's room to be very pleased and very proud of what you have been doing in the freedom movement, because we are gaining strength. We have gained strength in the universities and the young people, and we're gaining strength among another group of people who knew what was right but sort of dropped out. They tried to hold things together intellectually, and they are the remnant. And the energy that comes from the young people is overflowing into this group of individuals that now are coming out and getting involved. So I see a lot of reasons to be optimistic, but not overly confident. So this is the reason why we have to keep a lot of good people in government and encourage more, and I think this is happening. We just have numerous people around the country. And it's also the reason that I've met Tom Davis and can get pretty excited about what's happening here. So I want to now go ahead and introduce Tom. I want you to give him really, really great reception. And I want to thank Tom for all his work and effort, because with people like Tom Davis, we can win this fight and win the battle for liberty. Thank you very much.
Father of the revolution right there, Ron Paul. 1976 is when Texas first sent Ron Paul to Washington, D.C. And he began his lonely crusade at that point in time against statism, against large government, against erosion of individual liberty. And it is a testament to his hard work that from 1976 to 2012, we finally see these intellectual ideas coming to the forefront. We finally see every politician. It is de rigueur now. If you're a conservative politician and you're giving a speech, you're going to talk about the size of government. You're going to talk about free markets. You're going to talk about monetary policy. You're going to talk about the erosion of individual liberty. That was not the case even 4 years ago. That's the result of this man right here, steadfastly beating against the shore of statism, beating against statism, and we now have a beachhead. We have a beachhead now that we have to gather ourselves, and as he leaves at least official public life, it is our job to step up and build on his successes and to build on the awareness of what happens when the Federal Reserve triples the monetary base in the last 3 years. I mean, it's absolutely stunning to me that the Federal Reserve, with quantitative easing 1 or 2 and maybe 3, purchasing treasury securities, purchasing corporate assets, has tripled the monetary base in 3 years. Those chickens are coming home to roost. And what you saw 2 weeks ago is a bipartisan majority in the House, and it was funny to me. Did you see right before that vote was taken, the number of congressmen that were scurrying to become co-sponsors because they saw the polls and they saw what the people thought, and they wanted to be on there as co-sponsors, whereas 4 years ago, they ridiculed that bill. They said the American people can't be bothered about the Federal Reserve. That's far too complicated for them to understand. They don't understand purchasing treasury securities. They don't understand manipulating the monetary supply. They don't understand manipulating the discount rate or the federal funds rate. But guess what? That curtain has been pulled aside, and people see it. And guys, it is not that hard to understand. If you've got $10,000 in the bank 3 years ago, and you've got $10,000 in the bank today, and during that time, Ben Bernanke has tripled the monetary base, what does that say about your savings? Is that hard to understand? No. That affects our everyday life. That affects our economy more, quite frankly, than anything Congress does. And my God, Congress has done a horrible job. But thank God we have patriots and freedom lovers like Ron Paul taking the mystery away from some like the Federal Reserve and exposing them for what they are. And it would be one thing if they were altruistic philosopher kings who wanted to do what's best for the United States, but they don't. They want to bail out their friends. They pick out what companies to bail out. They pick and choose with your money. And they don't want you to see the deliberations for 10, 15, 20 years because it's secret, because their objectives would be defeated if you knew what they were doing. That's wrong. How can that possibly be made, an argument like that, in a constitutional republic? How can anybody, Republican or a Democrat, tolerate that? We cannot tolerate that. And now that we have this beachhead, now that we have passed the House, put pressure on Harry Reid, who on one side of the House, stands on the floor of the Senate and talks about how we need to audit the Federal Reserve and pull back that cloak. We have got to make our voices heard. This is not a Republican issue. It's not a Democrat issue. It's not a libertarian issue. It's an American issue. It is in our DNA as Americans to stand as a free people, and we elect representatives who are accountable to us. They're accountable to us. And we have gotten away from that notion. I can't believe, Dr. Paul, that we're here in the year 2012, and we have to defend the free market. We have to defend the idea that the way to get ahead and that the way society prospers is by an individual having an idea, saving up their money, investing that money in that idea, working hard, and then reaping the benefits of their labor. We have come to a point where that's not what drives our economy, according to our president. The government drives our economy, to the point where he ridicules an individual who is successful and says, I look at them and sometimes I say to myself, they think they're successful because they're so smart. They didn't get there on their own. They didn't build that. Is that America? Is that what we want? We've come full circle. We've come full circle. We had Barry Goldwater in '64 pushing back against the statism of the status quo Republican Party back in '64. We had Ronald Reagan in 1980 who moved the ball forward a little bit further and beat back Gerald Ford and the establishment. Now we've got Ron Paul pushing that same message, having that same vision. And just like Barry Goldwater's plea for individual liberty and freedom and small government gave birth to Ronald Reagan 16 years later, it is our job to build on what this man has accomplished and to keep pushing, to keep fighting, to keep supporting people who stand for the Constitution, who stand for liberty, using your treasure, your time, your passion, because we can change things. And if we don't, this is where my role as a state legislator plays in. I pray to God that we can overcome a $17 trillion debt. I pray to God that we can reverse another $1 trillion deficit, which we've had now for 4 years in a row. I pray to God that somehow the Federal Reserve stops pumping more and more money, printing more money, and putting it into the economy, and thinking somehow that's going to fool producers into producing consumer goods. It's not fooling them, and hasn't worked. I hope that we can turn that around. But if we can't, the genius of our U.S. Constitution is that it is a founder of sovereign states. Sovereign states that have, for their consent, granted specific enumerated powers to the federal government. And if the federal government wakes up one day and finds out that China doesn't want to buy our T-bills anymore, and if things start to implode, I want South Carolina to be the freest state in the nation. I want South Carolina to be a state that rewards liberty, that rewards hard work. I want to take our top marginal income tax rate, which is the highest in the nation, at 7%, kicking in at $14,000, and I want to slash that so that when California fails, and Illinois fails, and New York fails under their entitlements, South Carolina becomes a place where they want to live, raise their children, invest their capital, and prosper. That's what I want. So while Ron Paul is fighting that battle in Washington, D.C., my friend Danny Burton is over here, my friend Greg Gregory, other people in the General Assembly, our job is to make sure that South Carolina is a place that respects and promotes freedom, that limits the size of government, that rewards entrepreneurs. We have a small window of opportunity to do that. We have to do that. That's our job. That's my job as a state senator. I can't do anything about Denver and Yankee. I can't do anything about the federal debt. I can't do anything other than advocate for reform. But I can, as a state senator, make South Carolina the freest state in the nation. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to close by saying this. When Ron Paul was running for president in Beaufort County, every 4 years in South Carolina, being one of the first primary states, we have the privilege of being able to meet presidential candidates, and I met them all. I met Governor Perry, I met Representative Bachman, I met Senator Santorum. I met Governor Huntsman. I met Governor Romney. I met every candidate. And around political circles in South Carolina, people are saying to themselves, well, who should I get behind? Who's going to win? Who can give me a favor? Who can give me an appointment? To me, it was never about that. To me, it was about what person recognizes what is wrong with our country. What person is afraid, not afraid to tell truth to power. What person has been steadfast, not just walking the walk, but actually backing it up in Washington, D.C. And that's Ron Paul. So that was an easy job. Now I come from Beaufort County, and there are a lot of retired CEOs in Hilton Head and Bluffton, and a lot of them were shaking their head when Mitt Romney during the primary. They were shaking their head saying, their state senator has lost his mind. He's endorsing Ron Paul. But once I got out there, and once I talked one-on-one with each group, and once I talked about what the Federal Reserve was doing to our economy, and once I talked about what he stood for in terms of markets, then they got it. Then they nodded their heads. The job of each of us here, going forward, is to talk to your friends, talk to your family, talk to your neighbors, get them on board with this message, because as Dr. Paul just said, we have right on our side, we have rally on our side, we have the founder's vision on our side, because what does the Declaration of Independence and the American Constitution do? It was created for one purpose and one purpose only, which is secure the blessings of liberty and the rights that are given to us by our Creator. That was government's job. Government was never supposed to step in and take care of us. It's our job to take the message forward. Thank you, Dr. Paul.